The Turin paradox, an architectural blueprint of the impossible. Imagine a forensic cold case where the evidence is not a body, but a ghost etched into a piece of ancient linen. For centuries, the Shroud of Turin has been dismissed by some as a clever medieval hoax and revered by others as the literal burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth. But in the year 2026, the debate has shifted from the realm of theology into the terrifyingly precise world of quantum physics and artificial intelligence. We are no longer asking if the image is real in a religious sense. We are asking how a piece of fabric can contain data that violates the known laws of thermodynamics and chemistry. What follows is not a story of faith, but a chronicle of a scientific anomaly that should not exist in our physical reality. The mystery begins with a silent, high-resolution scan. When advanced neural networks were fed the billions of pixels constituting the shroud's surface, the algorithms did not find brushstrokes, pigments, or the frantic scratches of a medieval artist. Instead, the AI identified a mathematical continuity that mirrors the structure of a hologram. This is the hook that has paralyzed the scientific community. The image on the cloth is not a surface-level application of color. It is a three-dimensional topographic map encoded into the molecular structure of the fibers themselves. Before we descend further into the microscopic data that challenges the very foundations of history, if you find yourself captivated by the intersection of ancient mysteries and cutting-edge science, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Your support allows us to continue these deep-dive investigations into the paradoxes that define our world: the knight, the bishop, and the silence of history. The documented history of the Shroud is a labyrinth of shadows. It officially emerges in 1353 in the obscure French village of Lirey. A knight named Geoffroy de Charny presented the cloth to a local church, yet he offered no explanation of how he acquired it. This lack of provenance immediately triggered a civil war of words. By 1389, Bishop Pierre d'Arcis of Troyes was writing frantic memorandums to Pope Clement VII, claiming he had uncovered a fraud. D'Arcis asserted that an artist had confessed to cunningly painting the image. He characterized the exhibitions as a profit-driven deception designed to prey on the credulity of pilgrims. The Pope's response was a masterclass in institutional ambiguity. He did not declare the shroud a forgery, nor did he proclaim it a relic. He permitted its display only under the condition that it be called a representation. This decision created a theological vacuum that persists to this day. The Vatican maintains the cloth as an icon, an object of devotion, rather than a relic, which would require a definitive scientific stamp of authenticity. When the House of Savoy acquired the cloth in 1453, it became a nomadic artifact, surviving fires, water damage, and political upheavals before settling in Turin in 1578. The most significant physical trauma occurred in 1532, when a fire nearly consumed the relic. Molten silver from its casket dropped onto the folded linen, burning holes through the layers. The repairs, conducted by Poor Clare nuns, would later become the poison pill for 20th century carbon dating, a detail we will analyze in depth as we uncover the flaws of the 1988 investigation. The photographic negative paradox. For 500 years, the shroud was just a faint, brownish stain on a dirty piece of linen. To the naked eye, the image is nearly invisible, a sepia-toned smudge that lacks definition. That changed on May 28, 1898. Secondo Pia, an amateur photographer, was granted permission to photograph the cloth during a rare public exhibition. In the darkroom, as the glass plate developed, Pia nearly dropped the negative in terror. The negative of the photograph showed a positive image. This is a logical impossibility for a medieval painting. To create the shroud, a 14th century artist would have had to paint a negative image, reversing all light and shadow, centuries before the concept of a photographic negative even existed. A negative image requires the darker parts of the object, the recesses of the face, the hollows of the eyes, to be light, and the highlights, the nose, the forehead, to be dark. No artistic tradition in human history, from the caves of Lascaux to the Renaissance, utilized this technique. Pia's discovery transformed the shroud from a religious curiosity into a scientific specimen. If the cloth itself is a negative, what was the light source that created it? The VP8 and the third dimension. The mystery deepened in 1976 when scientists applied the VP8 image analyzer to the photographs. This was technology developed by NASA to convert two-dimensional satellite photos of planetary surfaces into 3D relief maps. When you process a standard photograph or a painting through a VP8 analyzer, the result is a distorted, nonsensical mess. This is because paintings do not contain depth information. They use perspective and shading to trick the eye. The Shroud of Turin, however, produced a perfect, anatomically correct, three-dimensional relief of a human form. The image intensity on the cloth is directly proportional to the distance between the fabric and the body it once covered. The closer the cloth was to the skin, the darker the discoloration. This relationship can be expressed through a simple yet profound realization. The image was formed by a directional process that emanated from the body itself. It was as if the body became a source of radiation, projecting its own likeness onto the linen in a way that preserved spatial data. Statistical analysis of over 8,000 measurement points across the image reveals a correlation coefficient exceeding 0.98 for this distance to intensity relationship. For context, a perfect correlation is 1.0. No human hand, regardless of skill, could manually adjust the saturation of millions of individual fibers with such mathematical precision to encode 3D data. This is not art. It is a data-encoded map. The Manhattan Project of Relics, the STURP investigation. By the late 1970s, the Shroud of Turin had become a source of such intense scientific friction that a definitive examination became unavoidable. In October 1978, the Shroud of Turin Research Project, STURP, commenced what would become the most rigorous multidisciplinary study ever conducted on a single artifact. A team of 40 elite scientists, including physicists from Los Alamos National Laboratory, chemists, and forensic specialists, descended upon Turin with 2 tons of high-precision equipment. Their mission was not to prove a miracle, but to find the how. They were given 120 consecutive hours of direct access to the cloth. They utilized X-ray fluorescent spectrometers, infrared cameras, and ultraviolet photography to document every square centimeter of the linen. The expectation among many skeptics was that the team would find traces of iron oxide, mercury, or lead, the standard heavy metals used in medieval pigments. Instead, the results were a chemical silence. X-ray spectroscopy detected no pigments containing these elements beyond trace environmental contamination. Infrared reflectography, which typically reveals underdrawings or corrections in paintings, showed absolutely nothing. The linen weave was uniform, with no evidence of applied materials or artistic sketches. The microscopic frontier, 0.22 microns of mystery. The most chilling revelation came from the microscopic analysis of the fiber samples. The image does not soak through the cloth. It does not even penetrate the thread. It exists only as a superficial discoloration on the topmost layer of the primary cell wall of individual flax fibers. This discoloration measures approximately 0.22 microns deep, representing only about 1/1600th of the diameter of a human hair. To visualize the impossibility of this, imagine trying to paint a landscape on a single strand of a spiderweb without the paint soaking through or dripping to the other side. This is not a stain in the conventional sense. The discoloration is actually a form of oxidative dehydration, a molecular change where the cellulose of the linen has been stripped of hydrogen and oxygen atoms, essentially scorched or aged prematurely. Yet, the internal structure of the fibers remains perfectly intact and unaffected. At this midpoint of our journey into the impossible, it is worth noting that discoveries of this magnitude are only possible through relentless scrutiny and the support of a dedicated audience. If you are intrigued by the forensic details and the mathematical anomalies we are uncovering, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement is the fuel that drives our investigation into the deepest mysteries of human history. Forensic reality, the blood of a tortured man. While the image of the man remains a chemical enigma, the stains on the cloth are a different story entirely. Chemical testing and immunological assays confirmed the presence of real human blood. These stains tested positive for hemoglobin, albumin, and immunoglobulin, indicating that they were not the product of a painter's brush, but the result of direct contact with clotted wounds. The forensics paint a gruesome and highly specific picture. The blood is type AB, a rare group found in only 5% of Middle Eastern populations. More importantly, the blood shows a clear separation of red blood cells from serum, forming halos that only occur when blood is shed from a living, traumatized body, and then makes contact with linen after death. These patterns follow the laws of gravity with startling accuracy. Blood on the arms flows toward the elbows at angles consistent with a vertical crucifixion. The biochemistry of the blood reveals even darker details. The stains contain exceptionally high concentrations of bilirubin. In modern medicine, elevated bilirubin levels are a direct marker of severe physical trauma and systemic tissue damage, exactly what one would expect from a victim of extensive torture. A medieval forger would have had no knowledge of blood typing, which was not discovered until 1901, and certainly no concept of the biochemical markers of trauma. The paradox of the burn without heat. Every technological advancement has only served to deepen the paradox. If the image is a result of scorched cellulose, the laws of thermodynamics dictate that there should be evidence of heat transfer. Yet, the blood proteins on the cloth, which are extremely sensitive to temperature, remain undenatured. This means that whatever energy created the image, it did so without the temperature ever exceeding 45 Celsius, 113 degrees Celsius. However, to achieve that specific level of cellulose oxidation through known chemical or thermal means would require temperatures exceeding 200 degrees. We are faced with a thermodynamic impossibility, a high-energy burn that occurred in a cold environment. This suggests a non-equilibrium formation process that operates outside our current understanding of chemical kinetics. Through the lens of AI analysis, we see that these burns are not random. They are mathematically organized. Neural networks have identified that the image formation was strictly perpendicular to the cloth, unlike a painting or a contact transfer, where liquid spread laterally through the fabric. The discoloration on the shroud shows zero horizontal component. The information was projected vertically, preserving the 3D encoding and anatomical proportions that continue to baffle modern researchers. The radiocarbon execution, a verdict built on sand. On October 13, 1988, the scientific world believed the mystery of the Shroud of Turin had finally been solved. In a highly publicized press conference, the British Museum, Oxford University, and the University of Arizona released the results of the radiocarbon dating they had conducted on fabric samples authorized by the Vatican. Using accelerator mass spectrometry, the gold standard of dating technology, 3 independent laboratories reached a concordant conclusion. The linen dated between 1260 and 1390 CE. With a 95% confidence interval, the median date of 1325 CE placed the cloth squarely in the medieval period, precisely when it first appeared in the historical record of Lire, France. International media declared the shroud a definitively debunked medieval relic. For 5 years, the scientific community accepted these results as absolute. Carbon-14 dating is a reliable methodology based on the predictable decay of isotopes. If 3 world-class laboratories agree, the debate should be over. However, the Nature journal publication revealed a fatal flaw not in the chemistry of carbon, but in the sampling protocol of the shroud itself. The invisible intruder. Why the labs were wrong. The sampling protocol extracted a single strip measuring only 10 millimeters by 70 millimeters from the very edge of the shroud's corner. This choice of location was catastrophic. Textile experts eventually identified this specific area as a section subjected to extensive 16th century repair work following the 1532 fire. Microscopic examination of the remaining samples later revealed that the cloth tested was not pure linen. It contained cotton fibers interwoven with the linen. The original shroud consists exclusively of linen, but the sampled area showed evidence of a medieval technique known as invisible reweaving. This process involved incorporating dyed cotton thread to match the aged appearance of the surrounding fabric, effectively repairing damage while hiding the intervention. Furthermore, statistical reanalysis of the raw data from the 3 laboratories showed significant variations. One edge of the sample tested younger than the other, suggesting a gradient mixture of materials from different eras rather than a single homogeneous medieval fabric. The vanillin clock and chemical decay. A more definitive blow to the 1988 results came from the work of chemist Raymond Rogers in 2005. He focused on vanillin, a byproduct of the decomposition of lignin in medieval fabrics. Lignin loses all its vanillin over approximately 1,300 years at ambient temperatures. Rogers found that while the radiocarbon samples were rich in vanillin, consistent with a medieval date, the main body of the Shroud of Turin contained 0 vanillin. This chemical discrepancy indicates that the main shroud is substantially older than the corner used for carbon dating. Spectroscopic studies further identified gum and dye materials in the sample area that are entirely absent from the rest of the cloth. The 1988 test did not date the shroud. It dated a 16th century repair patch contaminated by centuries of handling. The botanical fingerprint, pollen as a silent witness. If the cloth is a medieval European forgery, its chemical and biological history should reflect the environment of 14th century France or Italy. Yet, the botanical evidence tells a different story. Max Frey, a Swiss criminologist, identified 58 distinct pollen species embedded within the fibers of the cloth. Of these, 28 species grow exclusively in the regions of Palestine and Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. Most significantly, specific varieties like Gundelia tournefortii and Zygophyllum domosum were found. These plants are native to the Jerusalem area and bloom specifically during March and April, the season of Passover. The presence of these pollens suggests the cloth was exposed to the open air in the Middle East long before it ever appeared in Europe. Geological anchors, the dust of Jerusalem. The forensic investigation moved from the surface of the cloth to the microscopic particles trapped in its weave. Researchers analyzed limestone particles embedded in the fabric, specifically in the areas corresponding to the feet and the knees. Using X-ray diffraction, they identified the mineral as travertine aragonite. This is not just any limestone. Its specific crystalline structure and chemical signature match the geological formations found in the ancient burial caves of Jerusalem. European limestone deposits have fundamentally different chemical fingerprints. Furthermore, dirt samples taken from these regions of the Shroud contain traces of myrrh and aloes, the specific burial spices documented in 1st century Jewish funerary customs. A forensic dead end or a new beginning? The convergence of botanical, geological, and forensic evidence establishes beyond scientific doubt that the Shroud had a physical history in the Eastern Mediterranean, specifically Jerusalem, centuries before the date suggested by the flawed carbon-14 test. The blood is authentic human blood of the AB group, consistent with Middle Eastern populations. The wounds are anatomically perfect, following the physics of gravity and Roman crucifixion methodology with 93% accuracy. We are left with a paradox, a cloth that forensics proves touched a crucified man in Jerusalem, but which possesses an image that no known physical process can create. The image did not come from the blood, the pollen, or the dirt. It is a separate phenomenon, a molecular scorch that encodes information at a level of precision that defies even 21st century imaging. The neural network verdict, beyond human hand. As we move into the 21st century, the investigation of the Shroud of Turin has migrated from test tubes to neural networks. In 2010, digital scanning technology reached a critical threshold, enabling researchers to capture the cloth at a resolution of 12,200 dots per inch. This produced digital files containing billions of individual pixels, where each pixel represents a mere 21 microns of the fabric's surface. When these massive datasets were fed into advanced AI systems beginning in 2015, the machines approached the image without the theological biases or historical preconceptions that have long plagued human researchers. The AI's first task was to compare the Shroud against the entire catalog of human art. Convolutional neural networks, trained on millions of images spanning 8,000 years of artistic history, analyzed the Shroud's spatial frequencies and tonal gradations. The result was an absolute statistical outlier. The AI identified zero correlation with any documented artistic method. The Shroud's image properties fell entirely outside the classification parameters for paintings, drawings, or even early photographic processes. Mathematical continuity and anatomical perfection. The AI detected what human observers could only suspect, a level of mathematical precision that borders on the impossible. While a human artist, even a master like Leonardo da Vinci, makes subtle errors in skeletal ratios or joint articulation, the Shroud maintains correct anatomical proportions throughout. Computational analysis identified over 300 distinct anatomical markers in perfect spatial relationship. Statistical modeling suggests that the probability of a medieval artist achieving this level of precision without the anatomical knowledge that wouldn't be available until the Renaissance is effectively zero. Furthermore, spectral analysis revealed that the image possesses mathematical continuity. In any applied medium, such as paint or ink, there are discrete boundaries and step transitions where pigment particles accumulate. The Shroud, however, demonstrates an infinite gradation across 256 tonal levels, suggesting a formation process that acted on the fibers with the consistency of a natural physical law rather than a manual application. The AI also confirmed the 1976 VP8 findings with a modern correlation coefficient of 0.98 between image intensity and hypothetical cloth-to-body distance. To achieve this, a forger would have had to adjust the scorch depth of millions of individual fibers based on a three-dimensional map they could not see, using technology that would not exist for another 600 years. The micro-inscription. Paradox. Invisible text. Perhaps the most startling discovery made through high-resolution digital enhancement is the presence of hidden inscriptions. In 2009, advanced image processing algorithms, applying edge detection and frequency filtering, revealed markings around the face region that are completely invisible to the naked eye. In 2010, Vatican paleographers identified Greek, Latin, and possibly Hebrew characters measuring between 1 and 3 millimeters in height. These fragments appear to be burial documentation, with some interpretations reading Jesus Nazarene in an abbreviated form. The style of these inscriptions matches first-century Jewish ossuary markings found in Jerusalem, a detail no medieval forger could have accurately replicated, even if they had the tools to write at such a microscopic scale. Beyond these letters, the AI detected microscript along the margins of the body and limbs, with character heights falling below 1 millimeter. Such detail requires magnification exceeding 20 times just to be perceived. While medieval scribes were capable of incredible detail, they never achieved this level of sub-millimeter precision in text formation. Sacred geometry and harmonic frequencies. The anomalies extend into the realm of pure mathematics. Neural networks identified that the distances between anatomical landmarks on the face and body approximate golden ratio, 1.618, values with startling accuracy. While these ratios appear in natural biological processes, they are rarely achieved with such bilateral symmetry, within 0.3% variation in artistic compositions. Further analysis using Fourier transformation converted the image into mathematical wave functions. This revealed periodic patterns in spatial frequency distributions that suggest a high degree of structural organization rather than random noise. These harmonic relationships indicate that the image contains layers of information that were likely not intended for human eyes, but are emergent properties of whatever high-energy event created the discoloration. The physics of an impossible event. The sheer energy required to create this molecular scorch without destroying the fabric is perhaps the greatest scientific hurdle. Energy calculations estimate that the power required to produce this level of oxidation is between 10,000 and 40,000 watts per square centimeter, applied for a duration measured in nanoseconds. This exceeds the capabilities of any medieval technology by a factor of over 1 million. Even with modern vacuum ultraviolet lasers, we cannot replicate the combination of superficiality, 0.22 microns deep, and uniform three-dimensional encoding across a curved surface. The image formation mechanism violated multiple physical principles simultaneously. It required an isotropic emission of radiation from the body surfaces, meaning the body itself had to emit light or energy in all directions simultaneously, with the intensity perfectly proportional to the distance from the cloth. This leads us to a final, inescapable conclusion. The Shroud of Turin is not a painting, a photograph, or a simple scorch. It is a physical record of an event that current physics can model but cannot yet reproduce. The final synthesis: 3 paths through the paradox. As we stand at the edge of all available data, the Shroud of Turin presents a scientific paradox that defies resolution through conventional analysis. We are left with an artifact that demonstrates properties which should not exist in any object from any historical period. After decades of investigation, using the most advanced analytical technologies humanity has ever devised, the image formation mechanism remains fundamentally unexplained. To move forward, we must evaluate the 3 primary hypotheses that attempt to explain the shroud's existence. 1. The theological event, resurrection physics. The religious interpretation maintains that the cloth is the authentic burial linen of Jesus Christ. This hypothesis proposes that the image was formed during a resurrection event involving an unknown release of energy. From this perspective, the shroud is a physical record of a supernatural intervention that operates outside the parameters of natural law as we currently understand them. This would explain the impossible characteristics, the 3D encoding, the molecular scorch without heat, and the vertical projection, as the result of a biological body becoming a source of intense radiation. 2. The skeptical materialist, the undiscovered fraud. The scientific skeptical position argues that despite the absence of supporting evidence, some undiscovered medieval technique created the shroud. However, this hypothesis requires a monumental leap of faith of its own. It demands that a medieval artisan possessed advanced knowledge of photography and negative imagery 6 centuries before the first camera. 3D encoding, the ability to vary pigment density based on distance with a correlation coefficient of 0.98. Forensic pathology, understanding the AB blood group, bilirubin trauma markers, and Roman crucifixion physics. Nanotechnology, the ability to restrict discoloration to the 0.22 micron thick primary cell wall of a fiber. To date, no experimental replication has successfully reproduced all shroud characteristics using medieval-era technology. 3. The naturalist boundary, emerging physics. The third path proposes that the shroud is the result of a natural phenomenon or an unknown physical process. Some researchers suggest earthquake-generated neutron radiation or corona discharge effects. Others propose quantum mechanical processes occurring during cellular death. These hypotheses attempt to keep the event within the realm of natural science while acknowledging that our current models of physics cannot yet replicate the required conditions. The artificial intelligence verdict. The integration of artificial intelligence into this investigation has been the final nail in the coffin for the theory of simple human fabrication. Machine learning systems, having analyzed billions of pixels and mathematical ratios, confirmed that the shroud contains information density and formation characteristics that challenge our fundamental assumptions about how images are created. The AI's identification of Fibonacci sequence approximations and golden ratio values in facial symmetry suggests a level of structural organization that rarely appears in art, but is ubiquitous in natural biological processes. Furthermore, the detection of microscopic text and first-century Jerusalem symbols, invisible for nearly 2 millennia, indicates that the shroud was not made for an audience. It was recorded with a precision that only became detectable with the invention of the digital computer. A mirror held to humanity. The implications of the Shroud of Turin extend far beyond religious doctrine or scientific curiosity. If the image formation truly involved unknown energy types or physical processes, the cloth provides tangible evidence of phenomena not yet understood by mainstream science. It suggests that the boundary between life, death, and energy is more porous than we have presumed. The forensic evidence is undeniable. The cloth contacted a real, traumatized human body. The blood is real. The wounds are authentic. The geological and botanical evidence firmly supports a first-century Jerusalem origin. These facts eliminate the possibility of a simple medieval forgery, while simultaneously failing to explain the impossible image properties. The Shroud of Turin exists as a physical artifact with measurable properties that defy explanation through known science, documented artistic techniques, or medieval technology. It represents either the most elaborate unexplained artifact in human history or evidence of a physical reality that transcends our current understanding of the universe. It forces us to confront a final, inescapable question. If we cannot explain this piece of linen with all our modern knowledge and analytical sophistication, what else about our past and our potential future remains fundamentally misunderstood? The shroud is not just a relic of a dead man. It is a mirror held up to the limits of human reason. If you have stayed with us through this deep dive into the microscopic and mathematical heart of the world's greatest mystery, we appreciate your intellectual curiosity. To continue exploring the paradoxes that define our reality and to see our upcoming investigations into ancient technology and historical anomalies, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support is what allows us to push the boundaries of forensic history.